Good morning, everybody. We are slowly strolling in this second day of the second week of the 2015 year, according to a certain group of people's calendars that they developed about 2015 years ago. Thank you so much for joining us. We are very excited about everything that's been going on over the last kind of 24 hours since we last saw you. I personally had quite a nice dinner last night. It was really good. It was a bit of a veggie burger. Really enjoyed it. Hope you guys also had some nice dinners. We can do maybe a sharing session later on and just talk about our food. I also set up an Instagram account just for this meeting so we can have some private sharing of food selfies and such like that. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the negotiations, which I heard also were occurring in some other place. And we are here to update you on everything that was going on. As per usual, I have Tini Smith here and Joshua Wiese, who are going to give me all of the updates that we need to hear on the communications and political side. And we're going to be then crossing live to the audience as we normally do for a bit of intellect gathering from everyone here in the crowd. We saw yesterday afternoon in the final stock taking that there was a lot of, support for the way the French government has proceeded in the first day of week one. But there was also one pushback from the like-minded developing countries group led by Malaysia, who mentioned that they would prefer to go back to line-by-line negotiations led by negotiators. So I guess there is potentially a bit of a procedural joust on our hands, but hopefully it seems that there was enough consensus in the room to try and encourage this type of continuance of ministerial meetings. And I hear generally, Josh, they seem to be pushing on okay. I mean, some of these issues are very, very difficult to deal with, but it seemed that there was some, steps forward from ministers, but definitely some room for concern as well.
I don't know if the picture is that rosy, actually. Welcome. Good morning, everyone. I just came from this Climate Action Network political coordination meeting where people shared their take on yesterday and the latest that they're hearing. And I suppose there is some good news, pretty much in line with yesterday. So we're starting to see a large coalition for high ambition building. I think there's agreement around a 5-year review for updating mitigation targets. We obviously saw some traction yesterday for 1.5 degrees. More broadly, there were pretty big announcements outside of the negotiations that sort of set the frame or reinforced this frame that the energy transition is underway. So we had, I think the biggest deal thing that happened, and I'm not sure this was well reported or not, is that global greenhouse gas emissions reached a plateau in 2014. And at the same time, global sort of economic growth continued. So we don't know if that's a peak. You can't just look at 1 year and say that's a peak. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So we can't tell if that's a peak, but basically last year emissions plateaued, largely to do with China, but lots of other contributors to that picture. And we still had growth. So we're starting to see the decoupling of emissions and growth globally, which is a pretty incredible thing. Now, it's not clear whether that's a trend, whether that's going to continue, but certainly is something interesting to take note of. Also, some big companies, Coca-Cola, Microsoft, BMW, Google, are the latest of 50 companies to commit to 100% renewable electricity. And there was a big geothermal alliance announced set to achieve a 200% increase in global installed capacity. So we're seeing, like, in addition to the solar announcement happened earlier this week and this big clean energy goal for Africa, we're seeing that continued momentum happen in the outside world, but in the talks themselves.
So I was right; it was kind of somewhat rosy.
Yes, so there's rosy parts, but in the negotiations, I think people are pretty frustrated. Actually, if you had a chance to listen to the high-level meetings with ministers yesterday, there's actually less. So we were hoping, after a real strong showing from heads of state, a lot of momentum and energy, that kind of faded with these negotiators taking these same kind of old positions and things just progress basically slowing to a crawl. We were hoping ministers could re-inject that high-level political momentum, and we really didn't hear that. We didn't hear ministers saying much of anything that was new or bold or really recapturing that spirit. And at the same time, we didn't hear that in the stock take last night. We're not in the rooms, so we're not a party to these conversations where governments are sort of laying out their positions explicitly. And we know that there are some leaders taking strong stances on a lot of our key asks across the board, but none of that is sort of being reported out, and none of that's being reflected in statements from ministers. So there's a lack of leadership, and I think it's good reason to be concerned. So just a quick rundown of what we're hearing from those meetings. So there's one group focused on the means of implementation, and their view was that, well, it seemed like there was a move toward developed countries continuing to lead on finance, but there's an interest by developed countries in not being the only climate finance contributors after 2020. So they're pushing to expand the donor base and include countries like China. I think yesterday we heard about the sort of concentric circles of differentiation idea, where you have the least responsibility sort of way out on the periphery, and the least capacities probably, and then at the center you have the most responsibility and the most capacity. And so I think somebody mentioned that the U.S. wants China in the center with them of that circle. So that conversation is continuing in this means of implementation discussion, and there isn't yet clarity on getting to 100 billion, on scaling up climate finance after 2020, beyond that 100 billion. Maybe some positive moves on the Africa group's ask for at least 32 billion of that 100 billion by 2020 to be adaptation finance. So we could be making progress there. Civil society groups, the majority that we work with as the Global Call for Climate Action, have asked for 50-50 split of adaptation and mitigation in that 100 billion. On differentiation, so whether it's those concentric circles or just the old annex system where we had developed and developing countries based on what the world looked like in 1992, this is still a very active and important conversation. There's a sense that there shouldn't be any backsliding. We've seen backsliding in the last few years from Canada, from Australia, from Japan on their commitments, and I think that those are fresh memories for governments. They want to make sure that it's explicit in this deal that can't happen. So that's agreed. Flexibility for developing countries with capacity building. So here again, the strong recognition that not everybody has the same responsibilities or capacities to respond to the climate challenge. And no legal obligations on finance, but opportunities for voluntary contributions. So that's sort of where things seem to be headed at the moment on the differentiation and transparency discussion. On pre-2020 climate action, things again are looking good, at least with some of the asks. There's a growing consensus that delivery of pre-2020 action sort of paves the way for post-2020 implementation, but whether there's going to be some finance or some extra support to make that happen is unclear. And we had these technical expert meetings over the last few years focused on mitigation. And so now I think there's agreement that went well. We're going to start building in technical expert meetings on adaptation as well as and looking at developed countries' ability to, or what they've delivered in terms of pre-2020 ambitions. So kind of reviewing that, taking stock. Lastly, the big piece, I think maybe the most troubling piece outside of finance, is this ambition picture. Yesterday, if you were here, we talked a bit about the ambition mechanism, some challenges around the year that we're going to be able to review progress and as well review the implications of our INDCs, the National Climate Action Plans. We know that they bend the warming curve down, we know that they don't get close to 2 degrees, let alone 1.5 degrees. So parties are getting closer to 1.5 degrees as a goal, and yet they seem to be backing off the specifics on what's needed to get there. So that's a big problem. How do we operationalize 1.5 degrees? And I think there's some pretty exciting actions planned today from civil society that are going to show that, express what we think what we think this agreement needs to deliver, so that this is not a joke, so that this is a real tool to accelerate climate action and adaptation. And just really quickly, maybe running through that ambition mechanism. What are we asking for? 5-year cycles, right? So we want to be able to update the technological, economic, and political assumptions that governments are using as a basis of the targets. 2030, which is 15 years away, is where a lot of the targets end, right? And how can we predict that far in advance? So solar prices have fallen really fast, faster than anybody thought. The divestment movement is exploding. And this transition, we know, is moving in only one direction. It's moving from fossil fuels to clean energy. So regular chances to update targets on the current reality and a lot more ambition is essential. And it could prevent countries from making overachievement. So we know a lot of governments are being real modest in what they put forward. It needs to have political teeth to raise ambition. So at the moment, it looks like there is countries are okay with the review, but just looking backwards, not looking forwards. And we need that to be a forward-looking review. We need countries to feel the international spotlight and sense that they're all moving together in order to force domestic discussions to happen, so that we can actually raise targets. We need that to start before 2020 to avoid locking in these inadequate INDCs all the way to 2030, right? We know we need to peak and reduce emissions in the next 5 years. We know that we're not on course to 2 degrees. We're on course to 2.7, 3 degree world. And we know what that means for the vulnerable countries. So we need that review to happen before 2020. And I think right now there's conversations around 2024 or after 2020 before this takes effect. Lastly, we need to link these cycles to finance and adaptation. So we obviously need the means to implement these climate action plans, and a lot of countries that have put forward adaptation plans or done any work in adaptation, they're planning for adapting to a 2 degree world, and we're headed for a 3 to 4 degree world. So we need to review that as well. And we saw some positive moves on this, again, from outside of the negotiations. Ban Ki-moon gave a press conference and expressed the need for 5-year cycles beginning before 2020 with this review. And we also saw a sort of unusual alignment of business, civil society, and labor, environmental groups, and labor. Richard Branson, the Virgin Group founder, and
the limit. Okay, hello. That's
sounds like we might have
free Apple we got for 2 minutes.
Strange, is there a mic out there?
So one of the aims of the COP21 is to reduce
what's going on here?
rising temperature.
Okay, well, it looks like we have a conflicting voice. Okay, somebody wants to talk about apples, maybe? I'm almost done. We can get to that. All right, so the other presser was Richard Branson, Kumi Naidu, the head of Greenpeace, and Sharon Burrows was supposed to be there, couldn't make it. All showing unity and calling for strong long-term goal, 5-year cycles starting before 2020. So I think that's going to be the emphasis.
And Josh, I guess kind of for those at home or around the world, if they kind of see this contrast between what we see is like a number of really positive announcements from businesses, obviously a number of positive announcements last week, and then kind of balance that with what they see is maybe a lack of urgency from negotiators. How do you think that kind of resonates around the world? Obviously, we're going to hear from Tierney in terms of where that is resonating, but kind of for those who might be watching from afar and hearing you kind of say that, you know, a lot of people in the world are moving kind of very, very fast towards this kind of transition, this transformation, and then kind of potentially some ministers are kind of stuck. How do we kind of navigate that just from a kind of, an understanding perspective?
I think we need to make it clear to ministers that are here. None of this is lost at this point, right? We can get a strong ambition mechanism. We can get clarity on finance. We can get a strong long-term goal. So we need to make it clear to them that that's how we're measuring whether this is a success or not. The world is moving in this direction, but this process will allow us to speed it significantly, and both help us transition to clean energy faster and boost climate resilience, because we know no matter what, we're already facing climate impacts.
All right, and just finally, there was a bit of concern about potentially at one time not having an allocated group for adaptation and loss and damage. Those watching at home, there were kind of 4 groups that were nominated to talk about different cross-cutting themes, which Josh has mentioned. And kind of we heard late yesterday afternoon that there's going to be an additional group to talk on adaptation and loss and damage. I don't think we have really any kind of updates from those negotiations because they're just starting in the bilateral sense. But do we have kind of hopes that they will tackle some of these kind of, I guess, really important issues, particularly for the G77?
Yes, certainly hopes. But the picture's unclear. We're not hearing it from ministers in their sort of high-level speeches, and we're not hearing it in these stock take sessions. So I think we can only assume that we have to push hard, really hard, for everything we want, and we have to be visible, and we have to engage ministers to make sure it happens. They've got a lot on their plate, and it'd be pretty easy to ignore us at this point, given our sort of lack of access to these rooms.
All right, I'm going to cross into the live audience right now for some updates from some of the best and brightest audience members we have, also some others who, but we won't nominate who's who right now. We'll just kind of find out very soon anyway. So we heard a lot of updates just from Josh. Does anyone want to nominate themselves to give an update at the moment? Any further intelligence that we've gathered? Well, I might then pick on some people I know. So here we have a few Malaysians with us, and we heard, Singaporeans. So Singapore is one of the chairs at the moment, particularly of the differentiation. That's obviously a very big task for Singapore. Your ministers are up to the task, and they'll be able to kind of figure out a way through this differentiation battle.
I think in Singapore's case, I've been to COP last year, and this is my second COP, and this is the second time that I'm aware that our minister he's a Minister for Foreign Affairs, Vivian Balakrishnan, he's facilitating the differentiation session, and I think he's up to task. I mean, he's moved from Minister of Environment to Foreign Affairs, I think for this simple reason of his ability to handle international negotiations, and I think he has played a strategic role in facilitating the discussions. Singapore, as far as I'm aware, we're up for capacity building for the ASEAN region, and I think in the case of differentiation, he's pushing for that as well, capacity building. In addition to that, our Minister of Environment, Masagos Zulkifli, the high-level segment yesterday, I think he mentioned a lot about peatland fires that's happening in the Indonesia region. So in comparison, tropical forests and peatland fires can store up to 20 times more carbon dioxide than tropical rainforests. But with the forest fires happening this year, Indonesia has emitted carbon emissions larger than Germany. So that's a very serious problem for the ASEAN region, and that's something we are touching on, highlighting at the international negotiations, because I think in a way it's a strategic move for Singapore to get Indonesia to do something at the political level.
Great, and just to give some background on people who might not know Singapore as well, obviously it's kind of a well-known country, but I don't think a lot of people know exactly just how kind of well-prepared your, I guess, ministers are. So you mentioned they were formerly kind of a Minister of Environment, now Foreign Affairs. Are you really confident they'll be able to kind of push through this differentiation difficulties that we're in at the moment? Do you think that this is resonating also in Singapore, that there's someone from Singapore with this much responsibility right now?
Okay, so a little bit of background. In Singapore, we have something called the National Climate Change Secretariat. So that's an office directly under the Prime Minister's office. And in that department in that office, we have different ministries working together. So Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Industry, Environment, and so on. And every year, although Singapore is a very small country, about 700 kilometers square, in total, every year we've been sending about 50 to 60 government delegations to COP to really send people out throughout the entire COP, gather intelligence, and also to, I guess, share what Singapore is doing. So in terms of, are we up for this international negotiations task? I think we are, based on the manpower that we have right now, and based on how the country is operating at the national level. That said, I think Singapore is very good at approaching everything from top-down approach, which we have for the last 50 years. I think in the last 5 years or so, there is a growing movement of initiatives and programs from civil society. Before the last 5 years, there hasn't been a lot of civil society work on climate change especially, but we do have that now. So I think if you guys follow through with what Singapore is doing in the next 2-3 years, you'll see more work from civil society on climate change, and especially at international negotiations.
All right, thank you. So that's the type of kind of in-depth briefing that you probably won't find in many other places, at least here. And this is kind of one of the reasons why I love jumping into the crowd and getting these national perspectives. Thank you so much. And I'm sure, Lastrina, people can contact you if they want to know more about Singapore and the way you're facilitating, right? Yeah, I'm sure. So that's I highly recommend taking that up. I see a lot of Brazilians here, and Brazil is one of the other facilitators, which we kind of heard a little bit about yesterday. Any reports back on how Brazil's going in their first day as sitting as a facilitator? Probably enjoying the limelight, I'm guessing, but any kind of substantive moves forward?
I don't have any substantive news, but yesterday there was an event at the Brazilian embassy here in France, and basically it was a celebration. The minister was there, the environment minister, and it was a celebration. She was signing a deal to end illegal deforestation by 2030. I mean, like, that meant absolutely nothing. And so, like, it is already a law in Brazil that, I mean, it is illegal. Deforestation is illegal in Brazil. But she was doing, like, a big thing that she was signing a deal to end illegal deforestation by 2030. And of course, we had to, like, go there and make jokes about it. So we went there and we gave her a trophy. Like, we passed through security and we gave her a trophy that means, like, translating something like poker face. I mean, like, how dare you come here and say that, like, you're signing this deal on deforestation, illegal deforestation. I mean, this is a law. If you do this, I mean, like, it's just fulfilling a law, and that's no big deal at all. And then on the exit, we gave away giant Viagras, and on the back side it was written like, keep the woods up, something like that. And that had like a huge repercussion with Brazilian media, and that like fulfilled our goal that like everything that's being discussed here, it's not being talked about in Brazil, and all our public policies in Brazil, it's not like translated here. So we want to make this link that's like, look what's happening here, look what's happening back home. It's not good at all. So like that happens.
Brazil is leading the effort to sexify climate change once again with their latest action.
Definitely. One thing also, I guess, it's kind of interesting for Brazil's case in particular. A lot of people here at the COP have been talking about the role of, I guess, fossil fuel lobbyists and kind of the fossil fuel corporates having an influence on the COP. In Brazil, this has kind of been a bit of a big issue recently with the floods in Minas, where a dam broke down. Can you kind of explain that situation, and has it changed the conversation in Brazil on the role of these like large mining and these large fossil fuel corporations?
Marcel is going to talk about it.
I don't know. I don't think that it doesn't change the situation. In October, we made a meeting with the Minister of the Energy, and he said the plan of Brazil's planning will not change because of the climate change. They will continue investing in fossil fuels, something like that. Brazil has a press-out. I don't know, it's how can I say in English, press-out. And the government still wants to explore, to developing the technology to explore the press-out. But I think the tragedy will not change the things, because we heard that our deputies in Brazil wants to end the process of, how can I say, the environmental binding, I don't know, binding, the environmental binding to create the miners. So they want to end this process. So I think the things will get worse.
Just to explain a little bit what happened in Brazil was that like a month ago, there was a mining in the state of Minas Gerais, and there was like dams, and those dams broke down, and more than 100 people were killed, and there's mud everywhere. The environmental disaster was so big that it actually killed a river. I mean, like one of the biggest river in Brazil. It's called Rio Doce. It's not going to have any biodiversity anymore for at least 100 years because of this environmental disaster.
Thank you, and I really hope that there is some kind of way we can turn this terrible news in Brazil into something that can, move forward. But I trust you guys are going to kind of be working on that, and I really hope that there's an opportunity for you in the future. I do notice, everyone, that while we are deep into the negotiations, there is thematic days on each day of the negotiations, and today is actually Gender Day. So I want to congratulate all of the men and women and in the room, and anyone who identifies as anything that they want to identify as in the room, and congratulate you for celebrating Gender Day. But in particular, there's one, I guess, story that I'm disappointed hasn't got a lot of headlines. Now, my friend here from Nigeria, the G77 this year is being represented by a very, very powerful woman. And is this something that is kind of resonating at home, or something that, other people in the G77, particularly in Nigeria, are proud about? Are you proud to have, I guess, a South African woman leading the G77 this year?
We can object to that. It is whoever represents Africa, provided they represent us well. But for us at home, I think we are okay. But I wouldn't know what the government of Nigeria is feeling about that. But to the little extent that I can talk about, I feel it's fine. And then we have a very viable Minister for Environment this time around, and I believe she will represent us well. So that's all I can say.
So Nigeria is being led also by a female Minister of Environment. Okay, so we have the two very powerful women. Is this signaling a kind of a shift in gender roles across Africa, or is this just kind of a wonderful day to celebrate?
I think it's the two. We have a shift, and then we have a competent woman to represent Nigeria. So it's not about representing women, but it's about who she is and what she can do for the country. And then also it's a plus for gender women rights activists in Nigeria that a woman is actually representing us. And then things has really changed back at home, being the new Minister for Environment. Everybody's sitting up and they are really doing very well. Even our delegations here in COP21, they are really working very hard because we have a new, and the power has changed, and then we have a new head who has been with the UN for a long time, and then she understands the issues, and then she really wants to make a change, and then she's very active, and then she has a listening ear to all, even to the CSOs. Recently, we are planning to meet with her. She's planning to meet with civil society in Nigeria, representing Nigeria at COP. So that's the planning is on. Though I don't have the idea of the date yet, but once it's confirmed, I'm sure I'm going to attend. Thank you.
And just finally, I guess Nigeria itself has been through a lot over the last couple of years. And I guess even before that, there was a lot of, I guess, concern over the Ogoni region and the way kind of oil has been, I guess, used or abused or kind of elements of corruption around that. Are you hopeful that with the new kind of shift in government that maybe there is a shift in the way that kind of fossil fuels and I guess natural resources are treated in Nigeria?
Okay. We recently have a new president in Nigeria, and he was here last week, and he has made commitment to clean up the Ogoni land. Though even that's a commitment, but they have actually not cleaned it up. But there are plans on the way to clean up the Ogoni land and then compensate the people of the Ogoni. Then we are really shifting to using the renewables. There are plans. We have new ministers, those who are ready to embrace renewable energy. And recently, even back at home before I come, there are so many programs going on. We are shifting from use of fossil fuel to clean renewable energy, and that I'm very sure of. Though they've not started implementing, but there are plans on the ground. Yes.
Well, thank you for that. And I guess kind of today is a day that we can celebrate this all day. Obviously, there was Ambassador Tck, who is the head of the G77. There was yesterday Julia Bishop from Australia, the Foreign Affairs Minister, was, I guess, leading a roundtable within the umbrella group as well. So there's a lot of great female leaders here that I think we can all celebrate today, and at least I'm celebrating. And I was chatting with some friends from South Africa this morning, and the Ambassador Tck's role here is not getting enough press, I don't think. And I just want to kind of personally put it out there that I think she's doing a pretty amazing role as a powerful woman here. And if anyone wants to kind of share that story wide, I think it's a great story to share today. Do we have any other kind of updates on Intel just now, just while we're kind of in the room? We have here, yeah.
Yeah, maybe not like Intel, but a quick note on loss and damage. Today, I think there should be coming out at a stock taking a bridging proposal of US and JOSIS. So that's going to be quite interesting this night. And there's also an action right afterwards here at 11 o'clock outside to have a strong loss and damage in the agreement.
Great, so let's maybe transition to some of those actions. Now, we do have a special update on one of the larger actions happening in the middle of the day, but I'm sure there's many other kind of actions going around. Who's got an action update?
The Women Gender Constituency is holding an action now at the Info Towers at 10:15. I think they should be there right now, and I would like to join them. Yeah.
Permission granted. Over here, you also have an update on an action.
Yep. Hi. So the World Health Organization Director General, Dr. Margaret Chan, is here today. Another powerful woman. And so to coincide with this, we think today is our last opportunity to put health back into the operating text, into Article 2. So we have an action in the space heading towards Hall 6. So I'm not sure what number that is for the action spaces, but in that area. So we're hoping to, we aim to meet at 12:40. The actions should start about 12:50, and the Director General will be walking past sometime soon after that. So she will see it, and we're hoping that negotiators will see it as well. The idea is to push for the health to make sure we recognise the health impacts of climate change and also recognise the health benefits of taking action on climate change.
Great, so Hall 6 is that way. You have to go through a couple of doors, but it's that way in the end. Do we have any other actions, updates? Oh, here we are.
Hi everyone. We have a cross civil society action at 1 o'clock by the Eiffel Tower over there. This action is on the ambition mechanism and the need for a pre-2020 review. We have the climate vulnerable countries who are coming. So we have 3 ministers from Costa Rica, Ethiopia and the Philippines who will signify that they have to do several things like have the pre-2020 review to get to a 1.5 world. So yeah, this action is on the ambition mechanism taking us to a 1.5 world. So it'd be really great if a lot of you could come at 1 o'clock, stay for the 15 minutes and then leave. But yeah, it'd be really good to show a big cross-civil society push on this, because this is what we really want to get out of the agreement in the next few days.
So I hear there might be a few kind of complications about getting involved in this action. For those people who do want to get involved, are there any instructions you have for how they can kind of best engage in the action?
Yeah, so the action is a kind of piece of street theatre. So in the actual action itself, there'll only be sort of 10 actors and from different groups. But what we want people to do is go stand around the back where you'll be able to hold the banners. It's an unbranded action, so don't bring your own banners, but we have stuff. And then kind of egg everybody on and cheer a lot. But that's how we're going to involve. But we can't have too many people in it, because it will just get confusing and spoil the picture. But everybody behind it would be really, really great.
And we had a bit of an intel update about some of the motivations behind it, but I think we're still missing some idea of the exact inspiration of this action. Why exactly is this action happening, and what do you hope it will achieve?
So at the moment, and in the agreement, it looks like we're heading towards a 3-degree world, right? With the INDCs on the table. So this action is very much showing that we have 2 paths that we can take in these next couple of days. One that leads up to 3 degrees, and this will actually be in the action. There'll be like 2 roads that the ministers come to walk on. So if you can easily go up to 3 degrees, but if you do these few things, if you get these few things in the agreement, then we can start to move towards a 1.5-degree world. So that's the kind of inspiration.
And what are those key things? What should we kind of be like hoping to get out of this action? Obviously, not within 5 minutes of the action, but potentially over the next few days.
So one of the main things is to have a pre-2020 review, so of the INDCs, and this ratchet up mechanism, so that countries are tied into having to become more ambitious. So that's what we want to push, because at the moment with what we've got, it's not. We know that it's taking us to 3-4 degrees, whatever report you read, but we know it's certainly not keeping us under 1.5.
So that's 1 p.m. just outside of Hall 6, is it? But the small Eiffel Tower, not the big Eiffel Tower. All right, because the big Eiffel Tower is really big. Yeah, all right, so the small, yes, no, don't go to the big Eiffel Tower ever. Stay here, it's better here. Anyway, I hear it's beautiful here as well, and twice as romantic. So, thank you everyone for the action updates. I'm going to cross now back to Tierney Smith, who is eagerly awaiting to give us a communications update. Tierney, how's the Daily Tck sounding so far through the headphones? And do you think it's one of the top 10 communication tools that you're going to brief us on?
Yeah, definitely. If you say so. Yeah, so just a quick update on what's been dominating the media over the last few days, and also to follow on from Emily's comment about the action, some ways that you can also get involved on social media. So yeah, lots of coverage, awful lot of coverage, lots more journalists here now, lots of people talking about the conference, but with limited information, as press also can't get into the rooms, and the people that would brief them aren't in the rooms. A lot still just on the process. A few things obviously being leaked from the rooms to certain journalists. There was a very interesting article in an Indian newspaper this morning that seems to have lots of quotes from people that were inside the rooms. But without that, there's sort of a lot more still about the process, and looking forward to what's going to happen over the next few days. So yeah, journalists probably as scrambling for information as much as we are. 1.5 is definitely dominating media coverage, a lot of media coverage over the various pushes behind that, and the different countries and the different organisations that are getting behind that. Also, Josh has already mentioned a few of the big names that were in town yesterday, so a lot of media coverage on Ban Ki-moon's comments. I think he warned that we were heading towards climate catastrophe, so that dominated the headlines quite a lot yesterday. And also we had Arnold Schwarzenegger in town yesterday, so he also got a lot of headlines for comments that he was saying. Josh also already mentioned the news out that global emissions are plateauing, so that also got a few headlines, probably not as much as it should have, but it did get a few headlines also. So pivoting to sort of what we're looking at today. If you do want to get involved in the action, but not in person, you can share the message on social media as well. We've had some tweets that have been shared on various email lists, and I can make sure that they're shared with you guys so you can get involved. Or I know that 350 will be on the ground tweeting a lot, so you can also check their Twitter page out and share their stuff. And along with that, we've got some infographics in the making. They should be finalised pretty soon, so that's a very saw a draft of them. They're a very lovely visual way of displaying how we can get from from 3 degrees to 1.5 degrees with everything that Emily just explained. Also, a lot of press conferences today with so little focus on the actual negotiations, with people not being able to go in the negotiations. A lot of countries are starting to lay out their sort of positions and talk to journalists directly in press conferences. So an awful lot of country press conferences today, including the Climate Vulnerable Forum will be given a press conference just ahead of the action. We've also got China, Brazil, India and South Africa are giving a joint press conference, so that could be quite interesting in seeing where their position is. Bangladesh is also giving a press conference. We expect it to be probably focusing on loss and damage, but head along and listening to that one to see what that's going to be about. Jordan's also giving a press conference today, which could be really interesting in terms of looking at a lot of the news and coverage around Saudi Arabia and discussions that we've had earlier in the week about how to potentially have other sort of Arab countries come out and sort of set themselves apart from Saudi Arabia. So definitely one to watch there from Jordan. And we also have a few sort of NGO press conferences today. Can will be doing their usual one at 11, which will give a really interesting big picture overview of where we're at in the negotiations, but they will also be talking about Saudi Arabia specifically. US Can also giving a press conference where they're drilled down into the negotiations. And there's also an interesting one at 5 p.m. New coal, is there really a market for it? So that looks like that should be interesting. I imagine the message from that will be no, but I think definitely give it a listen. It should be interesting. And also just to mention something that has already happened, but in case you want to watch it back or find out more information about it, last week we had German Watch release their Climate Vulnerable Index, which shows on a scale how vulnerable each country is to climate change. Today they are releasing their Climate Change Performance Index, so they're rating countries on how much they're doing to sort of tackle climate change. So that should be interesting as well. And I think that's it for me.
Are you sure? I don't think there was much in that update. I think like we could probably go on longer, but thank you so much, Tini. That was great. With that spoiler alert of no coal, well, I can probably imagine that's the case as well. What do you think, I guess, looking forward as the week unveils? Josh has mentioned that potentially negotiations could slow down, potentially that, a lot of these private meetings could continue. What do you think are going to be the headlines? Like, what are journalists going to be fighting for? Obviously, you're not a journalist yourself anymore, but like, what do you think that they're going to be stretching for over these last couple of days?
I think it will be really interesting to look at how they continue to look at country dynamics. I think a lot of focus has been national level, again, because they can't get into the negotiations, but potentially a lot of them have good relationships with their own delegations. So I think a lot of them are potentially getting intel on the national level of what other role their country's playing, but lesser on particularly the big picture of the international negotiations. And obviously, as more and more comes out and we have potentially more text on the table and that being released, then I think we can look at more sort of big picture understanding. And I imagine that a lot of journalists are also waiting for where the big fight's going to be. So I think also looking out for that, that will also, I imagine, dominate the headlines if and when it comes.
One last vague pitch. If you like adaptation and would like to support developed country governments who support adaptation, we hear that some of our partners worked very hard to encourage Germany to do so, and the German delegation is planning to make an announcement at noon at their pavilion. And we had some requests to show support for that, so that when they make that announcement, there are some people there thanking them, clapping them, and as a result, we might be able to repeat what they're about to do at noon on adaptation. German pavilion at noon. Feel free to go. little piece of good news.
All right, that's great. Thank you, Josh. And it's always nice to end on a high note because we will be back here tomorrow at 10:15. Please join us. Bring your friends, family, activists, negotiators, journalists. Everyone's welcome in here. And we look forward to being able to kind of share with you again political communications updates, intelligence from inside the negotiations, and also we live stream this on the ticktck.org website. So if you want to pass this on to any of your family or friends, please do so. You're welcome to do so, and you're welcome to invite them along again tomorrow. See you all then.